Hey everyone, welcome back. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about some tips that I would suggest if you're going to build your own cabin. It's been about roughly a year now since my dad and I started building this cabin together, and everything from the ground up we've done ourselves, except for the metal roof. The metal roof is the only thing that we had to hire someone to come in and do. Besides that, everything that you see we've done ourselves, and there's a few things that I wish we thought about before we started building, and I wanted to go over those with y'all. Some of those are things that I should have known, we should have known to do. We just didn't think about it because we were excited, or we started it and it just wasn't on the top of our mind. Some of it is pre-planning, some of it is stuff that I learned why we were actually doing some of these things. But I wanted to go over, we're not obviously done with the house yet, but we're getting pretty close, so I'm pretty excited. So this is what I've learned over the past year that I think would be super helpful to anybody wanting to build their own cabin. All right, first thing I wanted to talk about is measuring everything. I know that sounds completely idiotic, and that's one of the first things that you're taught whenever you're building. Measure twice, cut once. Measure, 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 measure. But there's simple things that you really wouldn't think about needing to measure. For example, you can see that we have these little cutouts on this trim, and the reason being is that we have 16-foot 4x4s. And one of the things that we just didn't think about is that we would have to measure the 16-footers because they came from the lumberyard. And it makes sense now looking back at it, because whenever you talk to actual construction people, they sometimes cut the ends off of these. And sadly, we just have a couple of inches where this overhangs, even on the frame of the house, to where we had to cut these little inlets out because it's quarter of an inch off, but it's just enough to where we can't cover it up with trim, and it's too late to go back and shave it. So it's not the biggest issue in the world, but always measure your lumber. And a lot of professionals I see, they go ahead and they shave it to begin with, the side that has the tag on it, and that just helps you know that it exactly that. So thankfully this isn't a big deal. We'll be able to paint over it, it'll be perfectly fine. But that's my first thing, measure everything. Hopefully this is a flattering angle. But the next tip I wanted to talk about was planning ahead for your drywall. And the reason being is that you can slap drywall up whenever you want, but if you don't plan for all this other stuff, like you can see going through the beams, the hot water, the electrical, you're gonna screw up really quickly. For example, we were gonna do the bathroom. We thought we were done. We definitely weren't done. So we had to bring down some drywall and set it all up. The other thing is, you can see up here and all the way around, our drywall had to go up a couple of inches because our walls are higher than 8 feet. Not the end of the world, but if you can prevent it, make it to where it's almost exactly 8 feet, and that may cause you to cut some of the lumber that's 2x4s that are 8 foot long. We actually did 2x6s in this house, just so you can measure it up. I don't know if that's how the professionals do it, but that may be something you want to think about, is the fact that ours were a little bit taller than 8 foot, so we had to do this little bit of extra drywall on top by only a couple inches, but it was enough to make it look a little funky. Not the end of the world, but that's how it ended up doing. So yeah, think about your drywall. The next tip I wanted to talk about is having to deal with electrical, and not necessarily how to set it up. That part you can learn really easily online. There's a couple of guys that explain it super well, and they're professionals. The thing I want to talk more about sort of ties into house plans also. House plans for the whole build. When we bought our house plans, we originally bought them off of Etsy. And I know that sounds stupid, but our thought was get the frame up in place and then we can figure out the insides, because the Etsy plans were only $100, but it allowed us to actually get all the stuff that we needed, the 2x6s for the rafter. It basically gave us the shell, but we didn't have any plans for electrical. And the issue with that is, just like with the drywall, is the plumbing and the electrical. We had to figure out how to do that before we put it up, and we had to plan everything before we put the drywall up. For instance, this little inlet right here, we completely forgot that we needed a outlet right here, not due to code, but we also wanted it to just be able to charge phones or whatever it may be right here. And to fix it, we thankfully didn't have to take down any drywall, but we had to pull it from the light up here to then run it down here to then run it back to the light up there so that the switch didn't turn off and on this outlet. But simple planning like that pays off miles down the road, because it may take you a couple weeks to do the electrical part. And I say a couple weeks just because we're not here every weekend. And once that's set up, that's great, but really think through, walk through each wire, figure out where each wire is going, double check to make sure that when you're done with all that wiring and you're about to put drywall, every single switch has power to it, and it's going to run to all the lights you want. And it's going to make sure it doesn't interfere with all the outlets you want. Little things like that really pay off. Especially think about all the outside lights that you want. For us, we wanted power to the deck so that we could have a fan out there and we'd be able to eat. We didn't really think about that till we had the drywall up in the kitchen and we needed to run through the kitchen to the deck. Thankfully, the top of the drywall wasn't done, so we were able to add it to the deck. But really think through your electrical and plumbing plans before you start doing any of the actual inside framing, or not the inside framing, but the drywall finishing, I guess I should say. And it will pay off a ton. Sit down with your plans, really think through where you want to go, especially if you want it to code. This is the code. So like outlets are every so far apart, and we can't go without an outlet every so far apart. So really think through that and it will help you out a ton. Final thing I wanted to talk about is utilizing your tools. And I know that sounds like a stupid statement, but really do research into ways that you can do things more efficiently. For example, when we put in these windows, we just sheathed this whole house. We didn't cut the exact measurement of the window before we put the sheathing up. Saved us a ton of time. And what we did after that is we then found that you can take a router with the drill or with the router bit that runs along the inside of the frame but cuts the sheathing. And so all we did was create a little hole, just routed out all the way around this window, the sheathing, popped it in place. Super simple. We didn't have to do all the measurements, make sure that it went up or it was cut out properly before we put the sheathing up. None of that. Now I will say there's a lot of sawdust when you do it that way, but that's just an example of checking to make sure there's not an easier way, more efficient way to do what you're about to do with any of the tools that you have. Thankfully, I had a router from a little bit of woodworking that I did, and it worked out fine. But there may be something you never thought about that you could use a circular saw or a multi-tool, whatever it may be. The other thing I wanted to mention is buy the correct tool. Yeah, it's going to cost you $100, $200, whatever it may be, but doing it with a janky tool that will work is going to screw up some of the cutting, and you're going to have rough edges maybe, or you may end up doing the drywall wrong, whatever it may be. It's worth spending the extra money on most things to make sure you have the correct tool to do the job. It makes everything look a little bit better, and it's a lot more efficient in the long run. But yeah, besides that, I hope y'all have enjoyed the tips. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll update y'all once this is done. We just need to mud and tape, and then we'll be putting in flooring, painting, and we have all the cabinets and everything ready to go. So feel free to ask me any questions. I'll answer them best I can. Besides that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Have a good one.